Greetings, campers and brethren. To start off, I want us all to ask ourselves an important question. What effect am I? What effect are you? What effect are we having on those around us? Within the church or outside the church, whether it be unconverted family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers, or just those that we randomly deal with throughout our normal life. Am I reflecting the nature of God in our daily life, in what we say and in what we do? Through our personal example, are we enticing others to follow God's way of life, or are we turning them away from that? Does the effect that we have reflect Christ's nature? Do people see the things that we do, how we conduct ourselves, how we work, how we play? Does that make them say, hey, I like what they're doing? They believe in some weird stuff, but I really like what they do. I admire them in their example. Or do they see our example and say, man, they believe some weird stuff, and man, they just really treat people bad. They're not loving. They're just hypocrites. Those are some of the things that we need to think about, is what effect are we having on others? Brethren, as God's people, we are representatives of God, whether for the good or for the bad. This morning, we're going to look at the Bible and examine one individual in Scripture whose faith in God and their personal example enticed another individual to leave their family, their country, their religion, all to come and worship the true God. The title for the Christian Living class today is The Faith of Naomi. The purpose today is to examine how Naomi's faith persuaded Ruth to forsake everything and follow Naomi and serve the true God of Israel. In the book of Ruth, so we can go ahead and begin by turning there, since we're going to be looking at that book. We're going to be here a lot, so you may want to go ahead and mark your place in your Bible. We know that Ruth is the primary character. It's kind of obvious by what the book's title is, but Naomi has a huge effect on Ruth, as well as her example has affected many people throughout the years just through her example. Naomi, her husband, and her sons left Israel to live in Moab, and there are indications here that they left because of a famine during the time of Judges, and they were there for a number of years because their sons ended up marrying Moabite women. And as the book begins, Naomi is dealing with a great deal of calamity and pain from just her husband just died, and then her sons died, and she is just left with 2 daughters-in-law, Moabite women. So Naomi decides to leave Moab and go back to her homeland of Israel to reunite with her people. So we're going to go ahead and look at verse 6, Ruth chapter 1 and verse 6. It says, Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Eternal had visited his people by giving them bread. Therefore, she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law and her, and they went out on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, Go return each of you to her mother's house. The Lord, the Eternal, deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Eternal grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. So she kissed him, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, Surely we will return with you to your people. So both daughters-in-law packed up, and they were in the process of leaving Moab to follow Naomi. That was the type of impact that Naomi had on the daughters-in-law. And we can see in verse 11, it says, Naomi tried to tell them to go back to your people, stay here, find husbands. So she tries to convince both Orpah and Ruth to go back to their families. And she even calls them daughters. That shows the closeness of their relationship and the bond that they had and the love that was there in that relationship. In verse 14, it says, Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So both of them were affectionate towards their mother-in-law, but Ruth, you could tell there was even a closer relationship because she was just clinging to her. This was a very, very emotional moment, but Orpah chooses to remain in Moab. And then Naomi tells Ruth, verse 15, and she said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." And I'm going to read verse 16, 17, and 18 from the New Living Translation because I just think it gives a little bit better of a feel of the emotion here. But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. Wow. Wow. Imagine some of us getting married, losing our spouse, and then deciding to just follow our mother or father-in-law to the land that they were from and just forsaking everything that we had known, the country we had grew up in, the families that we had, churches or whatever that we were going to. Imagine that, just going to a place that you have no idea about except through the example of one person. The story of Ruth reminds me there's a lot of similarities also between Abraham. He had an exodus as well. There's another similarity there. Left everything to serve the true God. And this theme is consistent throughout the Bible and is still consistent today. We all have had to forsake false gods, false ideas to serve the true God. We should all strive to do our best to live peacefully with those around us, those who believe differently. But if you have to leave somewhere to follow God like Ruth did, you have to do it. Sometimes that may mean leaving friendships, leaving jobs, leaving homes, relationships with family, church fellowships. We have to be willing to do what we have to do. That's how important it is. We have to forsake this world. And I understand that this may not be popular, and it wasn't popular probably for Ruth to leave Moab. I'm sure people were thinking she was crazy, following after her mother-in-law to serve this God, this God that allowed her to lose her husband and her sons. I'm sure they mocked her like crazy. But still, she followed after Naomi. That's the kind of impact that Naomi had. And I'm sure that relationship grew throughout the years and Naomi impressing on her and showing her faith and trust in God in various situations. But still, it's there. And another similarity that can be noted here is that of Paul. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1 says, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ," or "follow me as I follow Christ." So Ruth was following Naomi as she was following God, the God of Israel. She set that kind of example. Campers, brethren, are we setting the type of example like Naomi that would make others want to follow us? We should desire that. We should desire to set the kind of example that others want to follow. That is good. This may include wanting younger people in physical years to follow after us, or those just younger and spiritually weaker in the faith. Even those out in the world, we should want them to follow after us too. Even older people, if we're trying to set a good example, sometimes we can set a good example as youth to those older than us. To be honest with you, throughout camp, I've seen a number of you youth setting examples that I want to emulate. That's right, and that's good. We should want to do that. Yet, on the other hand, we all need people in our lives like Naomi to encourage us, faithful men and women of God who we can emulate, and whose example we can follow after. This concept also reminds me when I was working as a personal trainer, a nutritional coach, and during that time I also competed as a bodybuilder for a number of years and even got to the point where I earned my pro card as a bodybuilder. But even though I had all this knowledge of meal planning, workout programs, I still sought after a trainer to help me take things to the next level. I needed that. I needed that extra prod. I needed that extra push. I needed that extra experience that someone else could provide me to help me be a better me. We all need that. We all need someone to prod us, to help bring out more in us than we think that we have within ourselves. And youth, sometimes friends can provide us that, but I want to mention that a lot of times some of the people that are our age have not been through some of the experience and aren't equipped to give us some of the advice that we need in life. So we really need to seek after older members in the church to provide us with some of the things that we need to help us to get through some of the challenges that we face in life. And adults, for the youth to feel comfortable in doing so, we need to make sure that we are investing in them. We're doing that here at camp, but we need to make sure that we continue to do that and that we strive to develop close relationships with the youth by actually talking to them. And one of the things that I have found to be really helpful is to actually ask them questions. Don't preach at them or correct them constantly. Get to know them. Ask them about themselves so that they get out of their shell and start talking to you. So that way you can develop a close relationship. And maybe you can be a Naomi in their life and help encourage them to follow God closer. I also want to mention that we do need to be extremely careful of who we follow after and who we listen to. Follow me as I follow Christ indicates that we are assessing the fruits and actions of the individuals that we are following. And not just following them blindly, nor following them because of a certain position or title that they hold. No, that we are following them as they are following Christ. Not making anyone an idol. We must obey God rather than man, as we know it says in Acts 5:29. No one, no organization, no government of men, no man, woman, child, nor even ourselves do we follow over God. So in finding our Naomis in life, we must choose well. When I was about the age of some of you campers, actually no, probably the mini campers, one of my favorite cartoons or animated shows was G.I. Joe. And maybe I still watch that cartoon or maybe I don't. I'll let you decide on that one. But in G.I. Joe, the bad guys, they were Cobra. So they had this snake Cobra symbol on their logo, a logo on their chest or on their helmet, whatever they had, even their vehicles. So it made the bad guys really easy to recognize. I mean, wouldn't that be interesting if it was easy to identify others who caused us harm or could lead us astray? I'm not saying that we should have stars or logos or physical markings on anyone, but my point is we visually cannot spot those who intend to do us harm. So let's next turn to Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. We'll look at verse 15, Matthew chapter 7. It says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them." You will know them by their fruits spiritually. Now, that doesn't mean that our Naomis in life will be perfect. None of us are perfect. Christ was the only perfect example. However, as others are showing through their actions, their words, and their deeds, how they are following God, we can see whether they are or not by making sure that we study the scriptures, and then we can know what examples and things we need to emulate from their example. But, and this is important, to be able to recognize those whom we follow, we really must be studying in and drinking into this book to make sure that we are following those Naomis as they are following Christ. And let your relationship with God be your relationship with God based on the scripture, but not the relationship of your parents. Your relationship with God is yours. It's not your parents. It's not your grandparents. It's not mine. It's not Mr. Fritz. It's not Mr. Munson, but it's yours. And all of us need to make sure that we are having a relationship with God personally, talking with God, praying with, making sure that we study His Word, meditate on what the Word says. all of you, take time to think about, in the next few days, months, weeks, whatever, individuals who are following God, whom you can emulate, whom you can follow after. And I'm sorry for those of you who feel like you've come to the church as orphans, or maybe you've come to the camp not knowing anyone, and you came into the church with no physical family members in the church. I know it can be lonely at times. Both my wife and I came into the church with not having any physical family members in the church. And it can feel weird and you can feel lonely at times. But we have a greater family here, a more loving family. We are not orphans. And just like Ruth found a bigger family when she went to Israel with Naomi, the same can be for you. So the story continues, and Naomi's impression is still noticeable throughout Ruth's life. And we're going to continue to look at that. So let's turn back to Ruth, chapter 2. Ruth, chapter 2. Oh, there we go. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him, in whose sight I may find favor." And Naomi, she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So they are in Israel now, and they still are probably in a position of need where Ruth is having to go work out in these fields to get the food and things that they need to survive. Ruth was old enough to make her own decisions at this point. She was married before, and she could have made the decision herself to go out and work in the field. But she honored Naomi. She felt comfortable talking with Naomi and seeking her counsel and her advice, even her permission to go work out in the field. Naomi invested in Ruth's life. People here are investing in your life. Verse 3, then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to come to part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. So she works, she's working, and then Boaz comes. He takes notice of her, and he asks his servants there. He says, I see this Moabite woman working in the field. Like, what about her? So they said, so she works. And verse 7, the servant said, she rested a little bit. And in the New Living Translation, it says for a few minutes. But she's basically been working all day. She had a good work ethic. She knew how to work. So Ruth followed through. So there's a number of character traits that we're starting to see here and there that she followed through and with what she said she was going to do. And she had a good work ethic. So these are things to think about as we're developing our character to make sure that we are having these traits. And she was willing and capable of working in fields to harvest. Now, I must admit, we're pretty blessed with the motorized equipment that we're able to use in farming today, but they didn't have that back then. So she had to get out there and work hard with her hands. So she had a really, really good work ethic, and you had to have that kind of work ethic, especially back then, to survive. It just had to. And notice that Naomi didn't tell Ruth to go out and beg. No, she went and worked. Sadly, in our culture today, fewer and fewer people work hard, especially physically. We live in a self-absorbed, self-seeking, pleasure-focused world where they just focus on consume, get, just scrolling on social media all day, playing video games for hours upon hours, watching Netflix, you name it. It's just like totally just focus on just play and not work, not having a sense of satisfaction that comes from work. Now, there is a balance. There should be a balance in life, but we can play. However, one of the things that I say at our house is we work hard first, we get what we need to do done, and then we can play. But if we don't get that done first, then you can't play. Play is not an automatic right or privilege. It should be a reward of hard work. But once again, there's balance. And too many teens and young adults oftentimes get in trouble because of a lack of self-control, a lack of discipline, and they have excess energy that just isn't utilized properly. God didn't give young people all the energy that you guys have for it to just be underutilized or for you just to get in trouble all day. No, you should be doing stuff. You should be learning, setting yourself up to have a family one day that you can provide and protect and care for. And not just focus on yourself, but focus on developing a good work ethic for them, for the purpose of service. There's a book titled, Folks, This Ain't Normal. It's written by a farmer, speaker named Joel Salatin. In the book, he says, quote, in the Jewish tradition, boys become men at 13 years old. In fact, the term teenager did not occur until the Industrial Revolution. Until then, they were young adults. Many of the Pony Express riders were teens. These guys knew how to ride a horse, handle a gun, think on their feet, spot danger, be dependable. How many of you know how to use a drill, a hammer, to hang up a picture? There we go. I like to see those hands going up. That's great. Can you cook a few meals on your own? Would you be able to do things like that? Wash your own laundry, even pump gas if you had to do that? These are skills that we need to have. Another thing that I like to say to my children is my wife and I, Mom and I, are raising you to be adults. We're not raising you to be big children. You're children now, but we want to raise you to be fully functional adults, able to take care of yourselves and able to take care of your families. Parents, I don't mean to offend any of you, but sometimes as parents, we coddle our children too much and hinder their growth by being overprotective and not intentional enough in our teaching and training of them. I'm in the same boat. I need to do better. I need to be more intentional in the training and things that I'm doing with my children. Not too long ago, I was picking up feed at our local feed mill for the chickens and ducks that we have on our farm. And Micah, my little 4-year-old, he was with me as we were getting the feed. And these feed bags, they're 50-pound bags, and I'm loading them up onto the cart. And I kind of turn my back behind him, and I see him, and I'm wanting to stop him, but I see him pick up this 50-pound bag all by himself, move it over to the cart, and set it down. And I was like, whoa, he's 4 years old. And to be honest with you, I was a little afraid. Not afraid that he was going to get hurt, but I'm like, how strong is he going to be when he's 20 if he's 4 years old and pick up a 50-pound bag of feed? Whoa. So, just things to think about, that our children are oftentimes capable of doing more things than we think that they are. So, Mike, I apologize out there for doubting you that you could do it, but great job, buddy. Now, this may even sound harsh or extreme to some people that we should push our kids. And to be honest with you, I want my kids to face a certain degree of struggles in their life and have challenges from time to time, even make mistakes and even face defeats, because that helps them to grow. I know to the world that may sound really, really harsh and unloving, but it really is loving. And we can see from Scripture that God desires that from us, that He wants us to go through things. He takes us through tests and challenges to help us to grow, to be better. And oftentimes when we face those mistakes and we face those defeats, at the other side of those things, we recognize that it really was for our good. We are stronger on the other end. And character is not shaped by a life of ease and play. It's not. In that book from Joel Salatin, he also states, our culture now denies young people the very activities that build their self-worth and incorporate them as valuable members of society, end quote. Historically, children were trained to be contributing members to the family and to the society. The youth participated in many types of activities that were, a lot of times it was crucial for the survival of people. I'm really admire the Amish people for a number of ways and have had the opportunity to kind of see some of the things firsthand. But they get their children involved very early in different tasks. It's just their way of life. And I can still remember one time we were in Missouri in an Amish area, and I want to say the children were probably like 5 and 6 years old. And Mr. Munson, I believe, talked about draft horses earlier on. They were pulling some draft horses, these little 5 and 6 year olds, all by themselves. I was like, wow, that's impressive. I don't think I could do that. These horses were huge. So it just shows that they are really, you youth are capable of so much. Another task that historically youth used to be a part of is managing firewood to help keep the house warm and the family warm throughout the winter months. So they would, most of us have electric heat or gas to warm our homes, but that wasn't the case for many years. So the men would oftentimes cut down the trees. The younger teens would help split the wood, and then wives and younger ones would bring in the wood into the chimney or whatever else around the campfire to help keep warm. And let me tell you, it's very satisfying to do that kind of work. Oftentimes it is a family affair. It is a good idea to have 2 sources of heat if you can. You never know when the electricity is going out. So We heat with a wood stove. We do have electric heating as well, but it is so gratifying to know to go out there, go out in the woods, clean up some trees when it's just chaotic, and cut down some trees and create a new, cleaner area from an area that was just a jumbled pile of mess. And then take that wood, cut it up, split it, and then bring it in, knowing that you are providing for your family. You're protecting them from the cold. There's a great level of satisfaction of that is very different than just pushing on the heat button in the house. So this is something to think about. And I see a number of you young men, you got some big muscles and you like to roll up your sleeves and show them, hey, I did that too. It's okay. But we need to make sure that when we're developing muscles and strength, that it's not just for vanity or show, that we're developing strength and our muscles to better serve our fellow man and our families. And I'm reminded of Proverbs 31, where it talked about even the virtuous woman, she strengthened her arms so that way she could serve her family. So those are things to think about. We studied this book, and it shows us the type of examples of goals and dreams that we should strive for in life. Now, I know you youngsters have probably heard something along the lines of from some older people. In my day, or when I was your age, I walked 3 miles to school uphill both ways. I heard some of those things when I was younger. And as I've gotten older, I come to realize that, oftentimes some of our older members have gone through tougher times and had to do some tougher things. Now, I'm not saying they walked up the hill both ways to school. I don't buy that. But they did have to have a much greater degree of a work ethic. And we don't in our modern society. We really, really don't. And that's something as I was a personal trainer, I mentioned that earlier, that I had the opportunity to see firsthand. I worked with a wide range of clients from anywhere from, I probably think the youngest one was probably like 10 all the way up to like 84, 85 years old. But one of the things that I noticed that the clients that I had that were in their 50s and 60s, oftentimes they had a much greater degree of work ethic than the clients that I had that were in their 20s and 30s. And it was embarrassing because I was in that age group at the time, and I was like, wow, these guys just work so much harder. And oftentimes they're in better shape than the younger ones that I had. So for me, that was an example that our older members in society, especially right now in our society that is so focused on ease, most of our older ones have a greater work ethic, and we can learn a lot from them. And just because the society is going for a life of ease, that doesn't mean that needs to be the case with you all. You can develop a strong work ethic and get a greater degree of satisfaction from the things you do from a hands-on. Well, let's get back to Ruth. Ruth, chapter 2, in verse 8. And this is something interesting here we're going to check out. So, then Boaz said to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" And Boaz answered and said to her, "It has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and now you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. The Eternal repay your work, and a full reward be given you by the Eternal God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "Let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservant." What? He said, what? Our society would be like, he said what to her? No man can't tell me what to do, right? That's what our society would say. But no, she had the kind of humility that she was willing to listen to the instruction that Boaz had. And Boaz, he wasn't abusive for her. He was providing for her, making sure that if she was thirsty, she had what she needed to drink, and making sure that she was protected. So there's things to learn as we're going through here for both men and women, people of all ages here. And this is God's word. This isn't my idea of what men and women should be. This comes from the Bible right here, and the lessons that we can learn from, guys. So we are able to see a number of different character traits from Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz that are worthy to follow here. Naomi, she believed that Ruth, being capable of work, encouraged her to do so and encouraged her with love. Naomi didn't coddle her and say to her, "No, my daughter, go beg," or whatever. And then Ruth had a willingness and capability to work and willing to submit with humility. Boaz, a leader over the servants, provider, protector, protecting her in his fields. So at the end of the day of working in Boaz's field, Ruth came back and shared with Ruth how things went during her time working in Boaz's field. In verse 20, it says, "Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, 'Blessed be he of the Eternal, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead.' And Naomi said to her, 'This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives.'" This is so interesting that God guided this single woman who had just lost her husband to come into the field of a relative of Naomi's who was also single, capable of providing. You can see God's hand here. And in verses 21 through 22, Ruth continues to share with Naomi her experience and that Ruth continued to harvest in the fields of Boaz until the end of the harvest. And you can continue to see throughout this book the closeness that was there in their relationship. I encourage you guys that if you haven't read the book, the whole book, please go back at some point and do so if you haven't done so recently. Naomi teaches Ruth how to conduct herself within the society, and she's kind of like, you can see, a disciple of Naomi. And this reminds me of the instruction that is given in Titus. Let's go ahead and turn back there. I appreciate this tip from Mr. Fritz when he talks about the 3 T's there, Thessalonians, Timothy, and then Titus. That's really helpful. Thank you, Mr. Fritz. So Titus chapter 2 in verse 1. "But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, and in love and patience. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, and that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed." These are godly goals. These are goals that Naomi encouraged Ruth to pursue. So Ruth and Boaz end up getting married and having a son. We'll go to Ruth chapter 4 and verse 14. It says, "Then the women said to Naomi," actually, let's go back there. I'm skipping ahead. I'm sorry. Ruth chapter 4. Ruth chapter 4, verse 14. "Then the women said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Eternal, who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel, and may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has bore him.'" Others recognize God's blessing on Naomi and her relationship with Ruth. Verse 16, "Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became a nurse to him." Wow, that relationship was so close that Ruth was willing to, her first child, let Naomi nurse the child. Also, the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "There's a son born to Naomi," and they called his name Obed. "He is the father of Jesse, the father of David." This is just wow. And you can see that because of Naomi's faith, it blessed Ruth, Boaz, continued on for many, many years. Blessing of David, and even Christ, and even every single one of us here today because of her example of faith. It's pretty impressive. And I mentioned that God, that we should have our goals and dreams be based on this word right here. Let's next turn to Psalm 37. Psalm 37. Look at verse 4. Psalm 37. Actually, let's look at 3 and 4. "Trust in the Eternal and do good. Dwell in the land and feed on his faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Eternal, and he shall give you the desires of your heart." If we are faithfully trying to obey God, Believe in him. He will give us the desires of our heart, grant our goals and our dreams if they're based on his word right here, because he wants us to have good things. Despite what the world says, our God is not trying to be an oppressive God. No, he wants to bless us. He wants us to have good things. He wants to give you the desires of your heart. This story also reminds me of Job, who, even though through a tremendous deal of pain and suffering, at the end, God blessed him. He rewarded him. Our world today mocks women producing babies and caring for them. They say, we're not baby-making machines. I'm not trying to offend anybody again, but having the ability to produce another human being within you that is capable of being in God's family is a tremendous thing that you should never, never be ashamed of or feel bad for desiring. There is no career that can match that. None. Satan wants to destroy the family. He wants to destroy children. He wants to ultimately destroy every single one of us. God allowed Naomi to lose her husband and sons, but God had a plan for Naomi and Ruth, and the impact of the things that they went through were huge. Matthew 6, verse 20 says, we are to store up for ourselves treasures in heaven. No other treasure can we experience in this life that can carry over to the next and to help another human being in the image of God make it into his family. So that as family members, we can enjoy eternity together. And that's something really, really, really powerful that we all need to think from time to time. And the personal example that we have in our lives can help us to store up those kind of treasures as we're investing in every single one another, as we're investing in the members of God's family and in his church. And our personal example is much bigger than we may think that it is. All of us. Your faith, Marshall, it matters. Your faith, Darren, matters. Logan, matters. Sarah, matters. Alexandria, it matters. Don't ever think that it does not. We all must keep that in mind. By our interactions, our conduct, and our work ethic, that it has an effect on the people around us. And we need to make sure that we're setting a good example. And what we post on social media, it matters. Are we doing what is pleasing to God in what we share and what we say? Or are we rejecting and denying him? I'm not saying we need to go out there and be preachers online individually, but it's not wrong to talk about God and the blessings that he has given you in your life. Don't be ashamed of that. Don't be afraid of that. This book is filled of men and women who share God's blessings. You saw that here in the book of Ruth, and of them not being afraid to acknowledge those blessings. In conclusion, actions are often more powerful than our words. But even the most impactful words ever written here in this book are written from the personal actions and examples of men and women who have lived. We each have different roles within the church, within our families. Not everyone here is to be a head or a mouth, but whatever part we have within God's church, let us strive to set a good example and do it with our whole heart. Not poking out the eye, nor punching the mouth, nor bashing another member for what you think they should or should not do. But no, let each of us strive to do the best in what role we each have. Naomi was not a ruler nor a prophetess, but her faithful example and actions had quite the impact on so many. Ladies, I know it can be tough following us men around sometimes and watch us stumble and make mistakes, because we do. But your example can have a mighty, mighty impact on others as well. And whether we are a man or a woman, or child, boy or girl, our examples can really, really impact so many people. What about us? What about you individually? What about me? What kind of example are we setting? Today we looked at the faith of Naomi, and her faith helped Ruth and so many people throughout the years. One day, people may speak of your faith, your individual faith specifically, and how it impacted their lives greatly. Have a fantastic day.
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2021. Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.